Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? How does one start to tap into awareness when the only thing that we've ever known or understood is that following our intuition leads to ramifications? Thus, as a defensive mechanism, we've learned to stop listening to ourselves.
One thing that has helped me immensely, and I still do it today, is because the thoughts in my head were very self-destructive for a long time, I needed to start putting different words into my head, different voices into my head than my own. And so what I did in that, like the when I reached that tipping point and I decided to pivot and become healthy, or become healthier, is I had to start having a voice in my head that was, again, different than my own. So that's where listening to personal development audio, whether it used to be CDs, whether now it's podcast and YouTube and audiobooks, but that having that different person in my ear that was infusing positive energy, positive thoughts, and reminded me that I was worth taking care of. That is what helped me to start making incremental changes. And some of the earliest changes I made to start taking care of myself were some of the hardest. Like starting to brush my teeth and bathe regularly were really hard for me because I didn't feel I deserved even like deserving of that basic self-care. So because my inner voice was telling me I wasn't deserving, I needed somebody else to interject in that, you know, I guess just story I had going through my head, and I needed them to input a different story. And and so that's why, and even today, I'm constantly listening to podcasts and audiobooks because they help remind me of where I'm heading and where I want to be and make sure that I'm on the right path. And so I encourage anyone that's, in those very low moments and it's really hard to to even figure out how to get through the day, is to work on interjecting new energy and new input.
Yeah, I respect that, and I believe that's totally practical, right? And from the outside looking in, if someone's in the beginning of this journey and they're not sure about this, and even myself, I used to look at guys like Tony Robbins, I'm like, this guy's full of shit, right? And that's because what I was afraid of was recognizing the potential that I had within myself to create the life that I wanted to have. And in that process, I came to the understanding that self-talk is everything in this game. There are people right now saying things, and I said things to myself that you would get arrested for, or you get punched in the face. And it's incredible to me to think about the power of reframing that talk in my own personal life. And I've come to the understanding and belief that what you think is what you speak becomes your action become your reality. Talk to me about the pivot and the journey, and more so the way you used to talk to yourself versus the way you talk to yourself now.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. So in NLP, reframing is a very important technique with us, and I've used reframing through much of my healing journey. And so when I reached that tipping point and decided to pivot, um, I had to figure out, like, I was immensely overweight, and so I had to figure out, like, how was I gonna start taking care of myself, and I had to start getting out of my home. That was part of my issue, is I was staying in my home all the time, and so I decided to start, being around other people, and I started getting together with meetup groups and in walking groups and hiking groups, and with being morbidly obese, anytime we walked up even just a little hill, I felt like I was climbing Mount Everest. I was so out of shape. But something interesting started to happen as I started hiking. I started to see that I got stronger with each hike. Like physically, I was stronger. And something else started to happen. Because I was so overweight and each hike was hard, I had to mentally work through that difficulty to keep going during the hike and not give up. And so after each hike, even if it was a short hike, I would have to look at it and I would look at it and be like, I didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I could finish, but I did. And so what it started showing me is I was actually stronger than I gave myself credit for. I didn't think that I was strong enough to make it through my traumas. I didn't think I was strong enough to get through everything on my own, especially after my ex died. I didn't think I could go on. But as I started to progress through higher mountains and longer climbs, I started to prove to myself that I was strong. And that is where I could start reframing those, I guess, the story that I was telling about myself, the belief I had about myself, is that instead of looking at all that I had lost from my traumas, I started to look at what I had gained from them. I started to look at the strength and resiliency it took for me to stay standing with each progressive, stronger blow that life threw at me. And that was really important for me. And still today, reframing is very significant that I look at any setback I still have today and I shift it and I looked at what is the positive in it. And it's really been transformative for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's so much power in that because when you control the way that you talk to yourself, but also understand that you have to develop resilience in that and resiliency in that to be able to step into it time and time again and understand the power of that. And while you're in this position of like being in nature and seeing the world and seeing trees and mountains and things like that, like you must have absorbed that environment and saw something powerful in it. Did you feel like being in nature was a part of this journey for you?
Absolutely. So, part of my background is that I was a biology professor for 12 years. And so I love everything science. And so, being in nature, what was really interesting for me is I started to notice examples of resiliency in nature. I started to pay attention to how trees would navigate around rocks, like obstacles, like rocks, and how their root systems would allow them to stay anchored even though they were trying to get over this rock, and how they would bend to reach the sunlight, and how they would just make it work. And no matter what, they would bend and turn. And I started to see, like, because I know that all living organisms have certain things in common, if trees and other plant life and animals can exhibit resiliency in nature, I started to see and remind myself that that same resiliency is possible in me. So if something that can't get up and move around, like a tree, can figure out how to get around an obstacle and still not only survive, but thrive in an environment, I could do that as well. So seeing that resiliency in nature was very therapeutic for me. But it was also, I think, therapeutic in that just getting out of my home, but also like it just being in nature opens up possibilities in your mind. And I can't say enough. And even today, I still hike at least once a week because being in nature is just so helpful to me and it's part of my spiritual practice.